when someone transitions, a word that most people use is dies, he said when somebody transitions, he goes, the water in the body, because the body is 70% water, the water evaporates. When people are constantly consuming cold things and they bring that coldness inside the body, they take life away from themselves little by little. We should value water. We should have reverence for water, because without water, in a matter of a couple of days, you're going to be a dead container. You're listening to the Transform Your Life from the Inside Out podcast. This episode is titled Conversations with a Sorcerer, Healing and the Power of Frequency, Part 3. All right, so we've talked about in the last couple of episodes about healing and frequency and hormones and lymphatics. We've talked about attitude. And what I want to do here is talk about a little more of that and just reinforce it. And I also want to talk about, as I've talked about before, I want to talk about the healing power of water. Now, where I left off in the last episode is attitude. And one of the last things that I said is attitude is power, and you're the guide of your own intelligence. Think about that. You're the guide of your own intelligence. I remember one time we were having dinner and Don Javier said that many of us use our own intelligence against ourselves. Ponder that. Many of us use our own intelligence against ourselves. And as I was thinking about this episode, I was thinking about a program of mine, which we've offered here before, called the Get Unstuck program, which basically is built on the foundation of the Be to Have model, because we originally called that program Be to Have. You must be before you can do, before you can have. But the question of what does it mean to be? Something that I said in that episode is the conceiver is greater than the conception. Now, what I mean by that is the conception is, oh, I'm sick, I'm ill, whatever it might be. But the conceiver is your consciousness, because your consciousness is bigger. That's the totality of you. It's bigger than the ego you in the physical container bag of skin. So you in the bag of skin, you're the conception, meaning you're conceiving of ideas about water or your phone or whatever it might be, but you're the conceiver of the conception. Ponder that for a moment. So whatever your conceptions, recognize this, whatever your conceptions, you're the conceiver of those conceptions with your own mind, with your own consciousness. Consciousness is the end-all be-all. So you have to be careful what you conceive, meaning what you think, what you keep your attention on. You have to be careful of what you conceive, because what you conceive is what you declare. And what you declare is what you are and you must become. Think about that. So when it comes to your attitude, what declarations do you make? Think about that for a moment. What declarations do you make? Many people make declarations like, I'm so stupid. There's no way I can do this. There's no way I can heal from this. There's no way I'll ever be able to afford a home. There's no way I will ever be a millionaire, and whatever it might be for you. But ponder for a moment your declarations, okay? Because what you declare is what you are literally, you're the conceiver, and you're putting this out into it's the conception, but you're the conceiver of the conception, and you're putting this out in consciousness, all right? About supplementation, what I would suggest a lot of you guys do, because no two body is the same. I remember Don Javier talking about the body one time in modern pharmacology, and I said one of the problems of modern pharmacology is that it's one size fits all. You got high blood pressure, we'll try different medications. You got this, here's your medication. You got this, here's your medication. But every single body has different chemistry. So I would suggest perhaps you do a little of your own research into herbal healing. And what we tend to do in the West is we run down to that corner store called GNC. I've never gone there before, but that's where a lot of people go. General Nutrition Center, I think it's called, and they got all these herbs. And or we go to stores like Natural Grocers or Whole Foods or whatever, and we're looking at all their supplements and their herbal form, all the containers and all this. That's all well and good. And Don Javier has those of us that work with him taking a lot of those things. But beyond that, it's very frequent that he will have, like me and people working with him, making teas, making tinctures, all kinds of tinctures. And he's had me take herbs before, healing from different things. He's had me take herbs and he's like, these are the herbs you need. And there have been times that maybe it might be 10 different herbs. I'm not exaggerating. And he's like, okay, get this herb and that herb and this herb and get all these herbs. And then a lot of times I got to prep them by grinding some of the harder ones up or separating them or tree bark and all these kind of things, but not tree bark off your tree at home. And I'm not going to go into it right now, but he's had me have different levels and kinds of tree bark. And you can find some of this stuff medicinally. Then he's had me actually take it and soak it in like a couple of quarts or like a gallon jar of vodka and then shake it up every single day and keep it in a dark place. And then in a certain amount of time, after 28 days, moon cycles, then I actually strain all the herbs. I put them into, a container, keep it in a dark place. And then I actually just take tinctures every day, 3 times a day, of this particular tincture that I made. But it's all herbs and the properties of herbs. So, and again, do your own research on that for balancing your hormones, healing, whatever it might be for you. Now, back to this conversation. Her partner is a sports therapist. He works with like major pro teams. I don't exactly know what he does, but he's like kind of a big deal when it comes to pro teams and working with professional athletes on all kinds of healing. But she was talking about hot water, and Don Javier was saying, no, hot water is okay. Because her boyfriend was telling her that hot water kills the properties in the water. And Don Javier said, no, it doesn't. It might change the molecular structure, but he said something here that's going to throw a lot of people for a loop. He said that water has memory. Ponder that. Water has memory. And he goes, whether the water is hot or cold, it still has memory. But that's where I want to go for pretty much the rest of this episode. I'll get there in a moment. But we talked about the body being 70% water. And he said when someone transitions, a word that most people use is dies. He said when somebody transitions, he goes, the water in the body, because the body is 70% water, the water evaporates. And then the water goes into what he said, the cloud world, and it recycles again. So what he said is physically we come from Mother Planet, Pachamama. We live in the body consuming water. We leave the body and all the physical body has to be recycled again because water recycles again back to Mother Earth, back to Pachamama. And it recycles in ways of condensation and moisture and rain and etc. And I had a thought as I was thinking about this episode, I need to ask him about it. If water, because water has memory, and I'm 70% water, which I'll get to in just a moment, and you are too, when all the water in this particular body evaporates back into the universe, what happens to the memory of that water that was in this body? Meaning I'm pointing to myself, this body. I'm curious about what happens to the memory of that water. But he also said, water also holds the memory of molecular structure. And when he said that, I found it very fascinating because he said science says that it can change. It changes when it's heated, meaning water, but it still has the structure of memory. Try that one on for size. I mean, that's pretty profound that water still has the structure of memory. So here's where I wanted to go a couple of minutes ago. I was starting to segue, but I wasn't there yet. Is do you drink warm water or cold water? When I go to the gym, all the water, I take my own water to the gym, but all their water containers all are full of ice and it's all ice cold water. And he's told me for many years, and I've seen him, I always see him practice what he preaches. But those that work with him, and there are no hard and fast rules. I mean, he just shares things. You can do it, you can not do it, and it's fine. He probably won't mention it again, but he will at least share. But I remember many years ago, he said never, and he also talked about it in this conversation. He said never drink cold water. And he said cold water, his exact words were, cold water is a no-no. And he said drinking cold water is harmful. And what he also said, and I remember many years ago thinking, I think he might have used the metaphor of, imagine you walk into the kitchen and you've got a stove with a burner on, and the stove is completely hot, the burner's on, and then you throw like ice cold water on the burner. What happens? Now, of course, your body is not a stove, but your body is a certain body temperature. And he goes, when you put the cold water in the body with the higher body temperature, it's harmful. And what he went on to say in this conversation is that drinking cold water creates a crystallization in the blood. Think about that. Drinking cold water creates a crystallization in the blood, and then that blood runs into your body. And the comment that he made is that that takes your longevity away. The best way to drink water is room temperature. And I carry a water jug. I drink, this is 40 ounces that I'm holding up. If you're watching video, this is 40 ounces of water. And I drink three of these minimum, maybe 4 a day, but they're always room temperature all the time. I just don't drink cold water. It's hard for my body to even manage anymore. When you go to restaurants, that's all they do is they bring you cold water. It's not good for the body. But the best way to drink water is room temperature. And then you think about ancient cultures. They didn't have refrigerators. The Indians and the Chinese didn't buy refrigerated water and put it in the refrigerator and drink it when they were hot. Room temperature water is the best and the most healing for the body. And he went on to mention, I've not seen him have a beer literally in probably a decade, maybe even longer than that. But he mentioned in this conversation, he goes, yes, beer is cold. But he goes, if you notice me, when I've had a beer in the past, I don't gulp it. I simply just take sips of it. So if you're drinking something cold, and that's all you have, do not guzzle it. Simply take sips of it. So what you want to do is you want to think in terms of body temperature. And as I've mentioned, the inside of the body is, as I was alluding to, is not cold. So why would you put cold things, ice cold things, on the inside of the body when the body is not cold? So cold water brings, like I was mentioning, throwing cold water on a stove, it brings a shock, an energetic shock to the system, and that's not what you want. And a comment he made, he's just very, very good, very powerful with metaphors and comments. He talked about when people are constantly consuming cold things and they bring that coldness inside the body, they take life away from themselves little by little. Ponder that. You take life away from yourself little by little. So cold water lessens your longevity. Now, somewhere else I want to go that he didn't mention in this conversation. I'm going to wrap up this particular conversation on healing because I've got plenty more of things to share with you guys, and they'll crisscross, and they'll be basically, you'll find a wealth of information as I talk about these things, ways to heal and live better qualities of life. But I want to go into this episode to reinforce something, and that is blessing your water. Water is sacred, as I've said before. Water is holy, as I've said before. And we, as a species, abuse it. I mean, look around us. I mean, it's ridiculous. Even companies like Nestle, they're trying to monopolize certain things to make water available for capitalism and for profit. I mean, to me, that's the most low functioning consciousness in terms of how we're showing up as a species. I'm going to use the S word, we should honor water. We should value water. We should have reverence for water, because without water, in a matter of a couple of days, you're going to be a dead container, a dead bag of skin. And many years ago, he said, before I share what he said, what you may want to look into also, a couple of years ago, it was during the equinox, and for about 30 days, he had all of us that work with him drinking out of a copper water bottle. You may want to do your own research on that. Do some research on copper water bottles and the property of in the copper as it affects water. It can be very, very healing. So just food for thought, something I wanted to share. Okay, but about water is when I fill this up in the morning. Actually, I also I oxygenate, if that's a word, my water, meaning I put it in what's called a vitalizer, and it mixes it all up for 28 minutes, and basically it creates more oxygen in the water, and then I will use that for half a day, and then I'll do it again. But when I fill up my containers, what I'll simply do is what he told those of us that work with him. You can simply just hold the water for a couple of minutes, simply hold it and connect with it, and just be grateful for the water. Be grateful for what this does for you. And he said, every time you use water, you simply thank the water. You bless the water. You have gratitude for the water. Now, we humans, you know this. I talked about addictions, a little bit about habits a few episodes ago. We're not in the habit of blessing water. We simply, in the West, recognize, or in most industrial, if not all industrial countries, industrialized, like you just walk to the tap and you run the water in your bath water and your toilets and your drinking water. Whereas other parts of the planet, as you know, because we've done support for charity water. We raised hundreds of thousands of dollars for them inside my transformational coaching programs. Anyway, we just take it for granted. Think about that. We take one of the most valuable things in our life, we take for granted. And we should honor this. So talking about habits, what I did when I started this many years ago, I had sticky notes all over the house. I had them on my kitchen faucet. I had them on my shower head. I had them on my faucets in the bathrooms. I had them on the toilet. I had them everywhere. And every time that I would consume or use water, I would simply just stop for a couple of seconds. I mean, he was saying we don't have to sit here and go, Om. We don't have to do all these ceremonial things per se around it, because even the act of doing this is a ceremony. We don't have to do all these drawn out things. Simply engage with the water, bless the water, and you bless it by simply thanking it and being grateful for the water. Okay, this episode is a lot shorter than the last 4, 5, or 6. I wasn't sure how long we were going to go in this particular episode, but I wanted to wrap up this series. So your homework until the next episode, if you've not done this. So I'll give you a big takeaway, besides your transformational takeaway, which I also did in the last episode. Your homework is this. Get a water bottle and start using a water bottle. Normally you drink out of glass, but I drop things and I've got water bottles all over. So glass isn't the most practical for me. So this allegedly doesn't leach PCBs or what, I don't know what they're called. Basically the chemicals in the plastic. But you can find these where they allegedly don't leach into the water, and start blessing your water. It's vital. Every time you use this is your homework before the next episode. Practice, practice. Start blessing your water each and every time you consume it. Now, a little segue. When I fill this up, and I'm grateful for it, and I bless it, I don't have to bless. Some of you overthinkers are going to go, okay, do I have to bless every time I sip water out of this container? Do I have to actually say thank you each and every time? And then how long? No. Simply fill up your container, simply bless it. And a lot of times what I do is hold it up 5 seconds to my, what people would call their third eye. And I just hold it up for a second and connect in gratitude with it. So that's your homework, okay? And then you want to make sure you do that each and every time you fill up your water container. And ideally what you want to do is get in the habit of blessing your water, because think back to what I said. We're 70% water. Water has the memory, and what you infuse this water with, actually, I'll segue here for a couple of minutes, because somebody was talking to him about water and emotions. And he's like, if you are angry, like you're an angry person, or you have a lot of hate in you and you're a hateful person, then what you're doing is you're infusing the container that you are, which is 70% water. You're infusing this entire container with the anger, with the hate. And think for a moment, being and well-being, the healthier we're going to be. Because recall what I said earlier. What I talked about is it's not just about talking to the body, which is what this person was doing. And actually, I even taught this person that. But it's about what are you doing to assist your body? Use the water to assist your body, but infuse the water with the gratitude. When you infuse the water with the gratitude and then drink it, that automatically heals your body. Your transformational takeaway is, remember the example, the metaphor, the Porsche, not the example, but the metaphor. Go to the source to heal, not the externals. You may want, if you need medical attention, go get it. But you want to use the externals to supplement, but not as your primary source of healing. So all healing comes from consciousness. And consciousness is where you hold your attention and what you declare and your attitude and these things that are mental, because again, we go from thought to feeling to vibration to frequency. Okay, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you over on another episode. And I will be introducing, no idea what it is yet, but a new topic in our next episode. Okay, thanks for listening, and I'll catch you over on another episode or a little later. Bye-bye.